So, Trump's inauguration is on Monday, January 20th, and I've been reading a bunch of articles about it. But this is the most insufferable article I think I have read in a long time. You know, a lot of people said, oh, it's just the reason Kamala lost was liberal elites who just don't understand the working class. And this article reflects that 100%. Let's get into it. So, Washington, D.C. residents flee ahead of Trump inauguration. I can't be here. And Republicans are pouring in to celebrate. Alondra Whitney Smith has plans for President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration next week. Spend a week in a cabin without technology. Well, good for you. If inauguration weekend coincides with my birthday weekend, which I usually do spend in D.C., but when the election happens, I told myself, oh no, I can't be here. Whose mother was working at the Library of Congress during January 6th attacks on the Capitol in 2021. I just remember that feeling of fear for her. And then also just concern for me being in the city. I knew for me, I didn't want to be around that sort of hostile, negative energy. Okay, well, the D.C. resident said she will hunker down in a cabin with 4 friends during the inauguration and do some vision bonding. What the hell is vision bonding? Reflection and reconnection. As for the re-election of Trump, she says it represents the ugly side of America that people don't want to acknowledge. Yeah, most people can't afford to leave D.C. and vision bond in a cabin they rented out. Most people are working, okay, and can't afford to travel. So, I mean, if the working class can't vision bond, why do you need to vision bond? Whatever that means. I guess I maybe mistakenly had a lot of faith that people saw what happened during the first administration, and they figured we as a country wouldn't regress, said Whitney Smith, who works as an attorney. Oh, so she's got money. But also, I know the reality of living in a country as a black woman, okay? As much as I wanted Harris to win, there was something in me that told me that America was not ready for the first black woman president. Not only that, she was running against Donald Trump, who has almost cult-like following that. That is so powerful. I don't think it was that Kamala was a black woman at all. I think it's that she ran a terrible campaign. Biden didn't drop out nearly soon enough, and Kamala couldn't even answer basic questions like, how do you differentiate yourself from Biden and his, poor economy, or his, semblance of a poor economy. Whitney Smith and some D.C. residents continue to process a second Trump you don't need to process. He won. Like, this is another point. All these liberals are like, I need to, cope. Like, you of all people, being an attorney, don't need to process anything. You will be fine like you are now because you were an attorney. You were making good money probably under Trump. You were making good money under Biden. You will be making good money now. Your life is not going to fall apart. You're an attorney. Okay? Tia Butler, a Washington, D.C. resident, emailed her relatives asking who was interested in going on a cruise or some other adventure January 19th to 25th. Well, it's great that you can afford to go on a cruise. It's great that you just can escape for a week. Good for you. For Butler, memories of the January 6th riot in which Trump supporters violently stormed the U.S. Capitol in an effort to stop the certification of electoral votes and encountering pro-life protesters following the 2020 election made her not want to be in the city during the inauguration festivals. So, you can't handle pro-life protesters? Fat, middle-aged people carrying signs? You can't handle that? I mean, grow up. I don't know what to tell you. It's going to be cold, very cold for D.C. on inauguration. Most people are going to be indoors. I don't know why you can't just, work on that Monday or watch Netflix or whatever. Initially, Butler was expected to house guests in January in hopes of a different outcome. Oh, so you were going to celebrate yourself. So you don't mind the idea of people celebrating and cheering. You just don't like that they're cheering for Trump. But you will now spend the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday weekend in California. Oh, great. You can travel to California. Good for you. You can spend that several $100 plane ticket and travel and stay in California. Good for you. I have a fundamental set of beliefs and values that differ greatly from the supporters of the president-elect. So it is best that I just remove myself. Why don't you just don't involve yourself in the festivities or the celebrations and just stay at home? Human Resources executive who has worked for the federal government for nearly 2 decades before leaving to work at a nonprofit. It says to me that we'd rather have a criminal leading the country than a person of color. Or a criminal rather than a woman. It has nothing to do with her being black. It has nothing to do with her being a woman. Okay? This is just an oversimplification of let's blame Americans for being racist or sexist or whatever versus just looking at the facts that Kamala ran a poor campaign. And Biden ultimately helped tank her. June Williams Coleman has similar sentiments. In July 2024, the Houston... So they're not even from D.C. They're from Houston. This part pissed me off the most because this is the most out of touch. June Williams Coleman had similar sentiments. In July 2024, the Houston-based physician was in a clothing boutique in Martha's Vineyard. Wow. Was she heard screaming around the television in the shop. President Joe Biden had just announced that he was halting his re-election campaign and was throwing his support behind his Vice President Kamala Harris and a Democratic presidential nominee. People were jumping up and down. It was such a powerful moment, remembers Coleman, 61. It was really interesting being in Martha's Vineyard during this time. Everyone that you ran into was so excited about the Harris presidential candidacy. Like, who cares about Martha's Vineyard? Why did the person who wrote this, why did you bring up Martha's Vineyard, the most wealthy, elitist, out of touch? They're literally out of touch because they're an island. They're not even on the mainland U.S. They're on an island. Why are you bringing this up? Like, who cares what wealthy people in Martha's Vineyard think? They have nothing to worry about. They don't have to worry about Trump doing anything but cut their taxes because they're wealthy. Why are you bringing this up? Leftists or more leftists like me don't want to hear about the wealthy. The working class Trump supporters don't want to hear about the wealthy. They want to hear about Martha's Vineyard folk. Why are you bringing this up? Why did you interview this random... This person doesn't even live in D.C. They have a practice in Houston. Is this just some friend of the writers? And they're like, here's my liberal friend. Like, what does this have to do with actual D.C. residents? Like, you could have interviewed people on the street, working class people, but no, you interview somebody and talk about how they were in Martha's Vineyard shopping at a boutique. And they were like, oh my God, it was so wonderful. Kamala's amazing because we just think Trump is a mean man. And I'm not saying I like Trump at all, but I'm saying this insufferable attitude that instead of looking at the economics and the class issues, they just look at, well, he's so obnoxious. Coleman was so confident about Harris's chances that she purchased airline tickets to D.C. on the 28th of July, just a week after Biden's announcement, in anticipation of a possible Harris inauguration. Well, that's your fault. A Harris inauguration, she said, would have been unlike anything we had seen because of the joy. You're seeing joy now. You'll see it on Monday. The joy of Trump supporters cheering. So there's still joy. It's just not the kind of joy you want. Because of the number of people who are going to participate, pointing to Harris's connection to historically black colleges and Black Greek organizations. Okay? There are also a ton of people who are supposedly going to celebrate at the Capitol or celebrate on their own. I know people who are going to have Trump inauguration parties. Many people who are going to celebrate and watch. So, not that I agree, but this idea that, Kamala would be unlike anything we've ever seen, well, I have a feeling that Trump's inauguration is going to see celebrations unlike anything we've seen in a while. Good or bad, your argument is, Instead of traveling to D.C., Coleman, who plans to get a refund for her plane ticket, will spend inauguration weekend in Lake Tahoe with her 15-year-old daughter. Great, you get to live. You have some house in Lake Tahoe, or rent some wealthy, Airbnb in Lake Tahoe. Very desirable place. Good for you. I can't afford to go to Lake Tahoe. Millions of Americans who are busting their asses living paycheck to paycheck can't afford to go to Lake Tahoe. Maybe you should have thought of this kind of things before you just, it's hilarious to me. It's like the person who wrote this. Well, let me just finish. In 2016, when Hillary Clinton lost, she still came to D.C. in 2017 because they had the Women's March, Coleman said, acknowledging the lingering political grief. I was so excited, and I really wanted my daughter to see that. But it's not the same now. Oh, because you get to go to Lake Tahoe and hide away. Oh, good for you. Who wrote this article? Lottie Joyner. I don't know who Lottie Joyner is, who wrote this Friday the 17th of January 2025. But you picked like 3 people, and they're all wealthy, out of touch. One of them doesn't even live in D.C. and lives in Houston. And they're all, I'm going to rent a cabin. I'm going to go to Lake Tahoe. I'm going to go to California. I can't afford to travel. Most Americans can't afford to travel.